Welcome back to the special edition of News Gang on what we are calling an unprecedented day, an unprecedented night, an unprecedented evening, when tonight the cabinet has been dissolved, save for one individual. Of course, I'm not counting the deputy president because we know, that's an election ticket that comes together. And we're speaking about, exactly the composition of that cabinet and those that have been sent home. So, Sam, the Attorney General, what's the position around that? Let's talk about that. In fact, let's paraphrase it from the speech, right, what he said, and indeed what the law says about that position in cabinet. Right.
Jamila loves to say that mbono tumie
mate na wino upo.
Na wino upo. So let's read the statement of the president.
Yeah.
And he said that I have, in line with the powers given to me by Article 152.1, 152.5b of the Constitution and Section 12 of the Office of the Attorney General Act, decided to dismiss with immediate effect all the cabinet secretaries and the Attorney General from the cabinet. And of course, if you have to look at the Constitution and the articles that he was referring to, there is 152, let me just get that, 152 talks about first the composition of the cabinet, but then when you're looking at 5b, it specifically says that the president may dismiss a cabinet secretary and many other things. So obviously that covers the president on what exactly the action that he took. If you had to look at Article 156, which he didn't reference, it is the article that establishes the Office of the Attorney General and goes ahead to even give what role the Office of the Attorney General should carry. Is the principal legal advisor to the government. It says that shall perform other functions conferred on the office by an act of parliament or by the president. So that act of parliament, which is what the president quoted. So he didn't reference Article 156 of the Constitution because unlike other articles, it has no provision of how to remove an attorney general or how they can leave office. Clearly, through it all, it doesn't say. Yeah. But Section 12 of the Office of the Attorney General Act, which the president relied upon, reads as follows. The president may remove the Attorney General or the Solicitor General from office only for the following: serious violation of the Constitution or any other law, gross misconduct, whether in the performance of their functions or otherwise, physical or mental incapacity to perform the functions of the office, incompetence or bankruptcy. Those are 5 paragraphs that provide the grounds for removal. But there is a subsection, that is 12.2, says, notwithstanding the provisions of subsection 1, which is what I've read, the president may, upon election under the Constitution, appoint a person who is qualified as Attorney General in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution and this Act. So clearly you can see that the only time the president can dismiss an Attorney General without going through the process of whether it's violation of the Constitution or misconduct or anything else about incompetence or bankruptcy is only when there has been an election. There has not been an election. If you look at what happened in 2022, Paul Kihara was the Attorney General. He left office because there was an election of a president. William Ruto has not been elected again. If you have to look at those provisions, at Section 11 of that Act on the Office of the Attorney General provides that the Attorney General or the Solicitor General may resign from office in writing addressed to the President. If you recall, in February 2018, Attorney General Professor Githu Muigai had been serving for 6 years, since 2011, was appointed by President Mwai Kibaki. When President Uhuru Kenyatta came to the office, he retained him as Attorney General. He stayed up until February 2018. He left office. He was not removed. He resigned. Of course, he may have been made to resign, but it is him that wrote that letter and read it out and said that he's resigning.
Right.
So I don't know what that says about the action of the president, especially when it comes to touching on the Attorney General.
And that would be interesting to see how that develops. And as we know, Kenyans are very quick on the mark for that. I want us, before we get into, go back in time a little bit, still referring to the speech of the president today, Linus, at the end of it, he said, and I quote, "I will immediately engage in extensive consultations across different sectors and political formations with the aim of setting up a broad-based government that'll assist in expediting and accelerating the necessary reforms that are needed to make government efficient. Now, this is the second time the phrase broad-based government is coming from the president, and at least based on what we saw during the signing of the IEBC bill. Linus, I wonder if when he talks about broad-based, if that means the same for the youthful protesters that we have seen. You know, we have seen this happen before, Linus, when there's a moment of crisis in the country, the political class particularly comes together, they call it what they will, from handshake, government to national unity. Broad-based in this context, does it include everybody, including the young people who have brought us to this moment we are here in today?
That's a very difficult question, and even for the president. He must continuously try to interpret correctly his own words, and that is what he means by broad-based. Broad-based can mean, in terms of the political spectrum, that it probably includes all the different political voices. Broad-based may also mean, in the context of the younger generation that is very restless, demographically balanced in terms of having young people in cabinet as well, or something like that. But the president faces the dilemma of interpreting the mood of the country correctly, and interpreting the demands of the protesters correctly. And from what we hear, and what you remember the list that was read out by Jamila a moment ago, the argument of the protesters is we are facing ethical, moral questions. This is not a political crisis. This is a moral crisis. People are asking about the quality of the values in government, the quality of the values among the people that sit in government. They have pointed out excesses, whether in terms of how they speak or how they spend. They've made an issue of that, their lifestyle and all that. So that is a crisis they are pointing at. They are pointing at basics. Did you hear about driving on the wrong side of the road? That's not a political crisis. It's a manners problem. It's a bad manners problem. So the president needs to really interpret that correctly, just to make sure that when he does his changes, you don't get someone who is not compliant on these other issues, but so he wouldn't represent the aspirations of these people that are making these demands on the street. So it's a very, very difficult balancing act. And I think the process of listening needs to be more thorough between now and the time the list is released. It needs a lot of good and accurate interpretation of the mood of the country. Because if you miss it, then, and there is an illustration, I nearly forgot to just illustrate the KICC meeting.
Exactly.
Look at what the reactions among the young people of this country, and not just the young, increasingly they have recruited, especially the older generations who pointed these things out but had no way of tackling them. And here are the Gen Zs saying, this is how you do it, you go frontal on this. Look at how they reacted to the meeting between the president and Raila Odinga, the opposition leader. You know that the former prime minister was forced to retract or to basically walk back on some of his steps. These are some of the things that need to be interpreted, because are we facing a political crisis? Maybe not. Is it a moral, ethical, values crisis? I think that is what these protesters have been saying.
Yeah, and you know, it was interesting, that picture, does that represent the face of Kenya? You saw all men, all a certain age and above, no women. There is a point at which we're now starting to come to a moment of reckoning with ourselves. Is that who we are in totality?
And it's certainly not a question of age. It's just a question of do they get it? You know, look at them and then do they get what we are talking about? I think that's what they're asking. They're just asking, all those fellows, do they understand what this is about? Yeah.
And Yvonne, as Lina talks about, do they understand? This is a generation that is doing things in a way that has never been done before. Yes, they were opposed to the Finance Bill 2024, and they explained why. I did a story where we're talking about how they took the Finance Bill, broke it down, and translated it into various languages voluntarily. And then did videos explaining why this is wrong. They were on TikTok, they were on Instagram, they were on X, explaining why this works, why this does not work. Because, Yvonne, in the past, it is not the first finance bill that we have had. I think the ones that have really caused a lot of public outcry, reaction, so itaga hisia mseto. The first one was the one for last year, the Finance Bill 2023. And during that time, the government disregarded public opposition to tax increases and even went ahead to even ignore the public hearings. Remember the housing levy and the opposition to it?
Yeah.
Remember all those sittings with the parliamentary committee and the opposition to the housing levy and other things which were in that last bill of 2023? It was said, we don't want them. We don't want it. Went to court. Ikatolewa. Ikarudishwa. And you know, you had a parliament that was literally, ukiongea kwa Kiswahili, walikuwa natumia vibaya, the majority that the ruling coalition had. And then they keep shoving down the throats of Kenyans these taxes and these measures that already unalazimisha watu ambao tayari washachoka. This is already a weary public. And then you're forcing these things down their throats. Iyo ikapita. Now this one now, ikaleta shida. Because I mean, hey, this does not make sense. And they're explaining why it does not make sense. Wanakumbuka watu walikuwa nasemaga, fulani akisoma, tumesoma sote. It doesn't matter.
No.
It's no longer that.
Guys,
yeah,
yes.
That is not business as usual. The status quo has changed.
Yeah.
So we have young men and young women ambao wamesoma. You know, we keep saying this is the generation that was walisoma wakati wa free primary education. They are aware, they are woke. And they're using that, and they're using social media and the platforms that are there to explain why we are refusing this. Hatukatai tu kwa sababu ya kukataa, tunakataa kwa sababu kuna sababu. And Yvonne, we saw how this opposition trickled down to their local constituencies. Members of parliament who voted yes could not go back home. Unaenda huko, you're booed in public meetings. You're asked to leave.
Yeah.
You cannot speak in churches. You cannot speak in public spaces because the people are thinking, we elected you kutuwakilisha because all of us cannot go to parliament. And when we elected you there, we want you to take our best interests when you're there.
Yeah.
So how can you try and justify to us that a finance bill that's going to raise more taxes na kututesa zaidi is good for us? And then we started seeing the apologies, Yvonne. We saw apologies online. We saw apologies on T-shirts. We saw handwritten apologies. Yeah? Saying, nisameheni, nilikosea. So, check it. But then now, but now even governors are not sitting pretty.
No.
Tunawaona,
That's right.
tunawaangalia. Yeah, because even when we talked about the auditor report, the control of budget, there's a story we have today, and it's going to run shortly, that shows the excesses in the counties. Vile pesa natumika vibaya. Miradi hakuna, we had curtains and gates and wheelbarrows and cows.
Yeah.
I mean, ni mchezo. So these are the reasons why we are seeing what we are seeing. Do things the right way.
Indeed, we'll come back and talk about Occupy counties because that's where it's going.
Yeah.
But before we look ahead, I want us to move back in time for a little bit. Now, in what seems to be a repeat of history in the running of government, I want us to take a look at the similarities and otherwise between President William Ruto's move to dissolve his cabinet and the path that the country's third president, the late Mwai Kibaki, took when he fired all his ministers and their assistants in 2005. Now, just like his predecessor, whose loss in the 2005 constitutional referendum was interpreted as a vote of no confidence in his government, President Ruto has also been under pressure to defend his administration's performance as a section of the electorate escalated their expression of displeasure with his government. Let's take a look at this report put together by Sefin Achieng Oma.
After suffering a humiliating defeat in the constitutional referendum on 21st November 2005, the late Mwai Kibaki's firm grip on government seemed to have loosened. The overwhelming no vote galvanized Kenyans' disappointment with Kibaki's leadership 3 years after he took power. This completed the split in his National Rainbow Coalition government, NAC, which was made up of the National Alliance Party of Kenya and the Liberal Democratic Party. A sharp split between Raila Odinga's wing, which was campaigning against the Constitution, and Kibaki's wing, which lost its push to support the Constitution. 57% of voters rejected a draft constitution Kibaki had championed, while only 43% supported it. The vote, having been interpreted as a vote of no confidence in Kibaki's government, forced a tough decision from the country's third president, who fired all his ministers and their assistants in 2005, except the then Vice President Mudi Awori and the then Attorney General Amos Wako.
Following the results of the referendum, it has become necessary for me, as the President of the Republic, to reorganize my government to make it more cohesive and better able to serve the people of Kenya. Accordingly, in accordance with the powers conferred upon me under the Constitution of Kenya, I have directed that the offices of all ministers and all assistant ministers become vacant. Consequently, the occupants of the said offices cease to hold their respective offices with the immediate effect.
19 years later, the Kibaki script played out as President William Ruto dissolved his entire cabinet Thursday afternoon. But in comparison to Kibaki's short and tough statement, Ruto's statement was long. In 11 minutes and 25 seconds, the head of state read 17 paragraphs, part of which was not just the justifications for his decision, but also an attempt to defend the government records this far.
Even with the progress we have made, I am acutely aware that the people of Kenya have very high expectations of me. And they believe that this administration can undertake the most extensive transformation in our nation's history.
Kibaki fired a total of 40 ministers, while Ruto fired 21 cabinet secretaries, including the Attorney General. The key difference being the constitutional dispensations. At the time of dismissal by Kibaki, the president enjoyed the ultimate power to hire and fire at will. But for President Ruto, terms and conditions apply. Safin Achieng Oma, Citizen TV.
Linus, what are those terms and conditions?
The first greatest terms and conditions is the Constitution of Kenya 2010. President William Ruto does not have the space that President Mwai Kibaki 19 years ago had. Though, you know, for President Mwai Kibaki it was so easy, the Constitution really gave a lot of power to the president. So you dismiss and hire without a long process. Nobody vetted those who are sacked, and nobody vetted those who are re-employed. So those are some of the terms and conditions that apply. The second thing is there's a huge difference between those two scenarios. And the greatest one is the motivation. For Mwai Kibaki, he had to change this cabinet in 2005. And remember also that was about 2 years into office, having come to, actually 3, because he came into office in 2002, December. Yes. And for him to survive, he had to do the reshuffle. He had to fire the cabinet and reconstitute it. Fire it to get rid of the half of the cabinet that voted against the new constitution. In more sophisticated democracies, this was a vote of no confidence. Actually, President Mwai Kibaki
Stinging defeat.
Yeah, that was a very stinging defeat. He would have resigned on the 21st of November 2005 in another country, but this is Kenya, so you have to do something to try and survive and finish the remaining period of time. And that's why he fired all of them and reconstituted. And when he reconstituted it, he brought in members of parliament from other parties. That is how Uhuru Kenyatta, who was then leader of KANU, came to cabinet. That is how the likes of Simon Nyachae from a different party, the Ford people, also came to government. Now PNU, this was the NAK, now became the only wing that has to reach out to other parties to survive, basically. So Mwai Kibaki was doing it purely for political survival. 19 years later, President William Ruto has to do it for two reasons. The first reason, of course, is political survival. He's got 3 more years in his elective term to go. And remember, the tag out there, the hashtag is Ruto must go. And what you naturally do as a politician is, how do you survive? I think the duty of a politician is to last. Make sure you finish your term. And that's why he has to now relook. Is it just going to be Kenya Kwanza, UDA alone, or is he going to the steps of Harambee House to produce a broad-based political formation that will allow him to finish his term? But there is another greater problem. The current changes, this cabinet has been dismissed on account of the strong argument from the protesters that we don't like the direction this government is taking. It's a service question. Is it serving the people? The protesters are saying, no, you lost touch. You are not running the country the way it should be run. You have people in cabinet that are incompetent. You have people in cabinet that should not be there on account of ethics and values. And questions like that. These were not the questions that Mwai Kibaki faced. No one really questioned who was in Kibaki's cabinet. But here now, 19 years later, they're telling President William Ruto that you have to be mindful of who it is that is in cabinet. So there's a service question, and there is a political question. Those are the two things that President William Ruto has to balance as he reconstitutes his cabinet. That is not the problem that Mwai Kibaki had. Kibaki had a simple question of, how can I survive? So get other guys to work with me, have a majority in parliament, and wing it all the way to 2007 rather.
Let's take another break here on Newsgang. We have much more to talk about, including where things go to next. Jamila had hinted at occupying counties. Looks like that has already begun. We'll be telling you about that and talking about that and much more. The hashtag is Newsgang at Citizen TV Kenya. You know our handles. Keep talking to us. We love to hear from you. Let's take a break. Back in a moment.